Hey everyone, and welcome to my guide for Apollo. Apollo is a hunter who performs best in the ADC role. Apollo mid was seen in SMITE's early days, but not much since. However, he was a prominent jungler just last season. However, I would highly recommend just keeping him in the duo lane unless you really know what you're doing, both with Apollo and the game itself. Apollo is the definition of a jack of all trades, master of none. He has solid wave clear, self-peel, mobility, split pushing, hyper carry potential, and extreme flexibility in his builds. Power pen meta, he's solid. Crit meta, he's great. Attack speed meta, he's nuts. There's no meta state where Apollo is too lacking to be useful. Speaking of builds, even though it's early days in Season 9, here's a few that I drummed up based on what top players have been building. So this is probably what builds will look like at this time, but like I said, whatever the meta build is, Apollo can build it, and it'll feel pretty good on him. Naturally, the good old beads Aegis are going to be standard on Apollo. Naturally, some more overpowered relics are going to replace Aegis in the future by high level players, but when you're first starting out on any new hunter, just stick with beads and Aegis until you really start diving into SMITE's current meta. You can think of beads and Aegis as all reliable. A lot like Apollo's first ability, Apollo strums his lyre, releasing a fast projectile which passes through all enemies and walls. Since this ability has similar speed and the exact same range as an auto attack, it's an extremely easy ability to land and get used to using. Walking forward or away while casting to extend your range, cancelling basic attack recovery time with it, etc. With such a short cooldown too, you can safely use this ability to clear waves and then just proceed to use it as harass right as it comes off cooldown, just to use it again once the next wave comes around. It may be one of SMITE's most simple abilities, but you can't really say no to a decent range poke and wave clear tool with a low cooldown. A bit more complicated is Apollo's second ability. Apollo sings, I guess? Then all enemies, including minions, are like, damn dude, and are mesmerized, starting from a 1.2 seconds scaling all the way to a massive 2-second mesmerize. Additionally, Apollo gains a physical protection buff scaling from 1 to 30. In SMITE, a mesmerize affects enemies just like a stun does. However, if the mesmerized enemies gets damaged by a god, including yourself, they are immediately cleansed of the mesmerize, with no lingering effects unless otherwise specified. Given its relatively fast cast time, and the fact that it doesn't go on cooldown if it's interrupted, this ability gives Apollo a wealth of options here. Cancel certain channeled abilities, give yourself a free auto attack or usage of your one, backstep into a large group that's chasing you and CC them off yourself. The possibilities are endless. And hey, even if you misjudge the usage of this ability, you still get a nice little physical protections buff for your troubles. Of course, you do still want to get the most out of this ability that you can, and if you grossly misuse it, you'll probably get punished for doing so, as when this ability is available, it sort of gives Apollo this little area of, no, I don't think so. But naturally, the better the player you're against, the more likely they are to be aware of the range of Apollo's mesmerize. And if you carelessly try to walk yourself in range to use it, they're just going to read the shit out of you and just keep themselves out of its range, and likely punish you for it. So while this ability has tons of very impactful use cases, it's not really an ability you want to live and die by given its very short and readable range as well as long cooldown. One ability you can live and die by is Apollo's third ability. Apollo dashes forward with moderate speed. He damages and knocks back all enemies he hits while dashing, as well as grants himself and any allies within the AoE at the end of the dash a scaling move speed buff, and any enemies in this AoE are not damaged, but instead receive a slow which scales with levels. This ability is pretty loaded, but there's really no need to overthink it. If you use this aggressively, you'll be damaging or at the very least CCing your enemy, and if you use it defensively, you'll be CCing enemies that are in your way, and always have a bit of move speed to help you get away. So in essence, whichever way you use this ability, it has additional benefits to help you with whatever situation you're using it for. Well, where does the quote-unquote master of none part come in with this ability? While dashing, Apollo is not immune to any form of CC, so anything at all is going to stop him dead in his tracks. So it's all well and good that this ability has a little knockback and move speed on the ability, but given that this ability has only moderate speed, most players can react or will simply wait for you to use this dash so they can either cancel it with their CC or simply use their faster movement ability to catch up to you. Still though, what it lacks in raw speed, it does make up for in terms of versatility, and utilizing it in conjunction with your mesmerize can lead to some of the most oppressive early game combos. But if we really want to talk about versatile, we need to touch on Apollo's ultimate. Apollo becomes CC immune and begins summoning his chariot, taking about 2.5 seconds to actually get to the sky. Once in the sky, Apollo becomes untargetable and begins consuming mana every second, and can land at any location on the ground, either at a time of his choosing or if he runs out of mana, or in rare cases once 44 seconds have passed. So far, I'm sure you've caught on that Apollo has a lot of abilities that are great in a vacuum, but can struggle in actual application, especially against players that know him well. His ultimate, however, is the one part of his kit that is objectively extremely powerful, and gives him the undisputed highest versatility as well as comeback potential of any hunter. He can use it to get out of every bad situation, get insane rotations that literally no hunter can match early and mid game, go for completely safe split pushes late game, and go for insanely aggressive plays if he's ahead. This ability does come with a hefty 110 second cooldown, as well as a crazy high mana cost, so it's not without its downsides. However, use it correctly and you can achieve things that no other hunter in the game can. Using Apollo's ultimate quote-unquote correctly is really all about reading the situation. Getting ganked by 3 people? Yeah, okay, that one's simple. However, reading when you'll be able to pull off a successful rotation and not just waste your own time as well as your teammates, as well as reading when it's smart to split push and not simply group with your team, they're things you'll learn as you play Smite as a whole, not just play Apollo. So when first starting out, it's totally fine to use this ability conservatively and use it mostly as an escape tool. But don't be afraid to start getting more experimental with it once you feel you have a better understanding of the ins and outs of how Smite is ultimately played. The true cornerstone to Apollo, however, is his passive. Once Apollo's passive meter is full by gaining 10 stacks, he gains a stim which grants him a 100% attack speed buff for his next 5 auto attacks, whether they are successful or not. Apollo gains 1 stack of his passive meter by successfully landing auto attacks on any enemy, both damageable and non-damageable, and also gets 1 stack per ability hit on enemy gods. Additionally, Apollo's dash grants 1 stack of his passive no matter the enemy type, so you can dash through a minion wave and grant yourself almost an entire passive meter. Since it gives a stack every time an ability damages a god, and since Apollo's ultimate ticks multiple times, landing on a god or group of gods almost guarantees a full passive as well. The way this passive works actually lets us understand a bit more about how stims work in Smite, so for a moment let's take a closer look. So let's just auto attack until we have full passive, then use the passive. So, as you saw there, the auto attack that gave us the stim had the regular cast time and recovery. However, the basic attack that fired after the stim had completed still had the cast time and recovery time of a basic attack that had the stim on it. In essence, Apollo actually gains 6 auto attacks with this crazy 100% stim on it, not just 5. So while he technically has 5 shots, he actually shoots 6 shots at this 100% speed, simply because that's just how Smite works. This leads into the downside of such an insanely high stim, which as of right now is still the highest single stim in the game. While most other stims work off of a duration following an ability activation, Apollo's limits the number of basic attacks you can have at the enhanced attack speed amount, and is procced by successfully landing basic attacks and abilities, as in a much less easily controlled method with a far shorter duration. This works very well in the early and mid game, where your stim is significantly higher than any other stim in the game and lasts just about as long as other stims. But as the level and item count rises, the better other stims become, as Apollo's more or less teeters out. Not to mention, it's extremely obvious when Apollo has this passive active, so anyone who sees you with your guns out is probably just going to wait it out. Still, it's not like towers or other objectives can do much about it, and this passive in conjunction with his ultimate is what makes Apollo such a fearsome split pusher. That said though, enemies can't know how close or far you are from having your passive unless they're watching you very intently. This means that, in conjunction with your other abilities, you can begin comboing an enemy ADC and proc your passive mid-trade. Speaking of combos, let's try a few. So in terms of ability leveling, it's pretty cut and dry. You want to get your 1 at level 1, your 3 at level 2, and your 2 at level 3, and then of course max your 1, which is of course your wave clear. Then from there you're going to want to max your dash, and then typically what you'll see is people usually skip putting levels into the ultimate and just hold it off until they absolutely have to. Having the damage on the ultimate is nice, but more importantly, the mana cost just gets higher and higher and higher on the ultimate. There is also some debate of leveling the 2 over the 3 second, as the cooldown of the 2 really goes down quickly as you start leveling it, but in my opinion, it's always best to have the extra damage and the extra move speed on the dash. While he is technically a simple character, his abilities have so many different applications and interactions that it's hard to feel like you're ever getting the most out of him. His abilities aren't infallible, but it's impossible to deny his versatility and hypercarry potential. He's a great hunter to start out with, since if you only scratch the surface of what he's able to do, you can still perform fairly well and don't really need to concern yourself with the more complicated intricacies of the character until you're ready to do so. So that's all I have for Apollo for now. If you think there's anything I missed, please let me know. Thanks for watching.